I've always taken a firm stance against participation trophies, probably because I was never allowed to participate, but because of that, I have to rank the Monk Monastic Traditions. So let's get into it. Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard Quiner, and welcome back to the RPG Daily, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game so you can share your stories. Today we're going to be ranking the monastic traditions, but before we do that, you might notice that there's a little bit of difference in my background. I have this big blank space over here and a cable kind of running down. It's because the last couple weeks we actually rearranged the entire apartment. Now my whole nerd workstation is in a different corner, so I had to find different angles to work for filming these videos, but I think I got it pretty close to how I had it before. And I'm doing some little upgrades, like I got a little tool rack back there. Anyways, now let's get into the monastic traditions. As we go through these, I want to know what are your rankings of the monastic traditions. Let me know your favorites, let me know your least favorites. Let's have a discussion. Starting off this list with the customary least favorite subclass, I had to pick the Long Death. I know the Long Death has some really good things. It's very survivable. It has, that's about all I can think of off the top of my head. Mechanic-wise, the Way of the Long Death didn't seem to have a lot of extra stuff going on. And while that's not the only criteria I use for picking what are my favorites, it is something I do keep into account. I tend to like to have things that are a little more mechanically inclined, things that make me think a little bit, and things that make the subclass play different than all the other classes out there. And yes, the Long Death does have some of those things, but its bonuses and its mechanics are pretty narrowed down into not a lot. And that makes me feel like this subclass wasn't really well thought out in terms of what there is to add to it. It feels like it was kind of thrown together last minute and put into the books because they needed to have something for it. But thematically, this one is very unique compared to the other classes. Being a monk that's obsessed with death is something interesting and can make for some great story moments. Just for me and my play style, it didn't really call to me, so that's why it's my least favorite of the monk monastic traditions. At number 5, I picked the Drunken Master Monk. This one, while the Way of the Long Death doesn't have a lot of mechanical bonuses and different things, the Drunken Master has a little bit, so it's not overwhelming with the amount of mechanical know-how that you need to have to play the Drunken Master, but it does give you a little bit so you can have a little more unique of a monk playstyle. The Drunken Master also lends itself really well to kind of silly roleplay moments and getting into that mindset of being drunk or acting drunk on purpose to thwart your enemies. Also, the bonus to performance makes it a really fun class to play in certain scenarios as well. In terms of what I really enjoy about it, I like the mobility bonus. Probably when I play, I really like to think about how to move around and mobility quite a bit. So the Drunken Technique and Tipsy Sway feats that you get as a Drunken Master really enhance the mobility of the already uber mobile monk. The other features, the Drunkard's Luck and Intoxicated Sway, just give you a little bit more to remember mechanic-wise without being too overwhelming and making your brain melt. For number 4, I picked the Way of the Four Elements. Mechanic-wise, this one does have quite a bit more going for it, but again, not so much that you can feel overwhelmed by everything that's happening. Because of this mechanic change, the monk feels a lot more unique and versatile, being kind of the spellcaster monk. If you ever wanted to play a wizard that had the survivability of a monk, this would be for you, I think. And the idea that you can spend key points to cast elemental spells really makes you feel like you can stay on par with the caster classes in terms of power level as you level up in the game. I know it's a bit of a gray area where sometimes the caster classes seem a bit too overpowered as you level up. Other people say that's completely false because of the extra attacks that a lot of the martial classes get, and the monk class is no exception to that one. They get plenty of extra attacks, but being able to add spells onto that really just makes you feel like part of that spellcasting brotherhood, so to speak. And thematically, if you're playing in a campaign that tends to have a lot of the elements involved in it, this is a really good class to play. It has a connection with all of them and can really just bring that to the story as well. For one, if I was playing something like Princes of the Apocalypse, which deals with the four elements, a monk of the four elements would be really interesting to bring into that and tie into that story. At number 3, I picked the Way of Shadow. Like I said in my video, monks are probably the coolest thing in the world in terms of our view of them from Western culture, we like the idea of the quiet assassin monk. The Way of the Shadow fills that role perfectly as the quiet assassin killer, and is a perfect replacement for a party that may not have a rogue. I think it's a good filler class for that. In addition to that, some of the best, arguably one of the most important things in the game is being able to keep the party quiet. Stealth comes into play heavily in a lot of scenarios, at least from my experience. Being quiet is almost always useful, and being able to cast Pass Without Trace on your party and help out with that is invaluable. I also think this class, though I did say I do like things that are more mechanically advanced and add a little extra to it, this one does not have that. It doesn't have a ton of mechanics that you need to remember, but it also does not feel like an afterthought or a rushed subclass. So that's why I really enjoy the Way of Shadow, and you can be a ninja. For number 2, I picked the Way of the Open Hand. Now, I had once called this the Quintessential Monk, and on top of that, this makes the monk stand on its own as a class. Where you have the Way of the Shadow could be kind of like a rogue, or the 4 elements could be like a wizard. The Way of the Open Hand, to me, stands alone as a unique way to play. Plus, when you're at the game table and you say, I'm going to Flurry of Blows, nothing is more exciting than hitting your enemy with your fists for a d10 or a d12 damage, whatever your martial art die is at the time, and just hitting them over and over again and pummeling your enemies into the dirt with your fist. That is cherry. On top of that, the meditative healing techniques of this monastic tradition are really good and really help you survive, but they don't push you into the realm of being the healer or the party tank. They just give you a little bit more to keep going. And my number 1 monastic tradition that I think is the most fun, most exciting, the one that makes me think, yeah, I'd really enjoy that, is the Way of the Kinsey. This monastic tradition I chose because it stands out. It bucks the trend of most of the other monastic traditions, where most traditions you will find a theme towards less weapons or one weapon. The Kinsey piles on the weapons, and it says, yes, no weapons, master the weapons. And I think that's very interesting and a very fun way to play. When you choose the Way of the Kinsey, you get to choose a Kinsey weapon, and every time you gain a feature in the subclass, you gain another Kinsey weapon that you keep adding to and making your own. Because of that, I think this makes for a very versatile character that you can make your own and really customize, because there are a lot more weapons out there than there are features. If you look into the martial weapons, you can choose some really unique, interesting things compared to the standard simple weapons or a short sword that monks normally have to stick with. On top of that, the different features that you get make it feel more nuanced in combat, and you really have to pick and choose the moments that you're going to use the different features in different scenarios. Some features require reactions, some are bonus actions, and you have to pick and choose which one you're going to spend at which time. So it makes the combat, in my opinion, more tactical for the Kinsey Monk. The amount of work that is very evident that they put into this makes me think that it was not an afterthought kind of subclass. They really took time coming up with the features and making them balance against each other, so you can have a one play style, you could switch to a different play style, whether you want to be a defensive tanky or an aggressive DPS type of monk. You can do both with the Kinsey class without being, in my opinion, too overpowering. There are still classes that do everything better, but this makes it unique and interesting. If you get into min-maxing, which has been requested, min-maxing kind of has this idea that you pick a style of play and you pick everything that goes to fill that style. The Kinsey Monk can do a lot of things. It's versatile. If you want to deal DPS, you're going to probably be better dealing with a fighter, or something that can hit hard, or even a barbarian, something that just can keep continuously dealing damage. If you want to be tanky, you're probably better off having a paladin or something with a lot more survivability in that way, or even a druid, something like that. But the Kinsey kind of combines both and makes it a fun, balanced class to play, in my opinion, because that's why I'm most excited about it, and next time I get to play a monk, that will probably be the class that I choose. All in all, as we can see, in every class and subclasses, some are strong subclasses, some are pretty weak. The Kinsey, I think, is strong. The Way of the Long Death, I think, is pretty weak in my opinion. But that, again, is my opinion. These classes I picked based on how fun I think they would be to play, not necessarily mechanics, numbers. I didn't go digging into the numbers and figuring out what is best. Mechanically, I figured out what is best for me, for my enjoyment, and that was my opinion. So let me know your opinion in the comments below. I want to know what are your top 5 or top 3 or just your favorite monastic tradition of the monk. I've been Richard. Thanks for watching.